Chords and Coffee, and today we're talking about using some basic 3-note triads. That's just your basic brown bean water coffee. Nothing special. You know, just about anybody can brew it up. We're talking about major chords, minor chords, basic chords, 3-note chords. Using those in a different context, particularly like in the blues, and you can yield some really cool jazzy results. So what am I talking about? Well, so let's take the key of E. And when I say the key of E, even that alone is a little precarious, because in the blues, if we're talking about E7, it's a dominant 7 chord. And if you're new to Chords and Coffee and you haven't heard this before, that's okay. This is a brilliant spot to jump in.
Every Saturday morning at 9 a.m. Central Time, we bring you a free guitar lesson with Chords and Coffee. These videos take time and money to create, and it's our free gift to you. All that we ask in return is that you leave comments on the videos and that you subscribe to this channel. When you do that, you make a massive difference in our ability to help to continue to have Chords and Coffee online for free. Thanks for being a part of this community, and thanks for watching.
Dominant 7 chords, which we have talked about before, they belong as the 5th of some other key, right? That was a big revelation to me when I was learning this, is that E major and E minor and E7, while they share some notes, functionally they don't have a whole lot to do with one another because they belong to different keys. E7 in this case belongs to the key of A. And so if I take an E7 chord, an E, a G sharp, a B, then a D natural, that's an E dominant 7, that's the 5th of A. So what happens if I take and borrow a few chords from the key of A? Specifically, we're going to look at B minor, C sharp minor, and D major. And when I play this for you, you're probably going to say, well, I've heard that before. That's pretty familiar. That's because this isn't a new idea. I didn't make this up. This is something that's been around for a long time. But the reason that works is that when you look at a B minor, so let's look at a B minor. B minor normally is B, a D natural, and an F sharp. That's it, B minor. 3 notes, it's triad, B minor triad, right? Let's look at a C sharp minor. C sharp minor. It's a C sharp, it's a G sharp, and because it's a minor, it's going to be an E natural, okay? So if I put this E7 over here on this side, and I'm sort of envisioning in my head, Jordan, that there's some graphics. Jordan's the guy behind the camera, and he's shaking his head now, because as soon as I do this, he knows this edit just got so much harder. I love you, Jordan. Blessings on your house. So E7, now we're going to have this B minor, we're going to have this C sharp minor, and let's also go ahead and put a D major. Well, what's a D major? So you've got a D, you've got an F sharp, and an A. So looking at this right now, just on paper, without even touching the guitar, this little exercise, if I play an E in the bass, and I play a B minor with it, and I think about B minor as 3 notes collected together, and how they relate to an E7 really, right? The B minor has a B, which is E's 5th, stay with me. Has an F sharp, which is E's 2nd, or if it's an octave above, it would be a 9th, right? And then it's got a D natural, which is E's dominant 7. So if I play a B minor, and I play that with E in the bass, I really kind of get almost this kind of an E9 sound. And I say almost because it's missing a G sharp. So it's like an E9 with no 3rd, right? Now what happens if I play a C sharp minor? Well, you get a G sharp, which is E's 3rd. You get a C sharp, which is the 6th, and you get an E, which is the root. So you kind of get this E6 thing, right? And then if I play a D major chord, if I start out here on the 7th fret with my index finger, just lay it flat against the D, the G, and the B strings, you kind of get this, it's almost like an 11 chord, because you've got the A, which is a 4 or an 11 in the key of E. You've got a D, which is that dominant 7, and then you've got an F sharp, which is a 9, right? Or it's D over E, it's the same thing. Now you might be saying right now, Nate, you lost me. That already sounds just like a bunch of hogwash, stuffy ninny-goggins. I made that last part up. Well, you've heard something like this before if you've ever heard. Right? Doesn't that sound familiar? It is. All that is I'm playing this little shape here, which is equivalent to a C sharp minor, to this shape here, which is equivalent to a B minor. I think I played it wrong just a second ago, but you're with me now, right? So you got a C sharp minor, a B minor. So what is this? Well, if we here, and I'm going to get my pages here so I don't get us off track here. If I take my, let's use our ring finger here on the 14th fret of the D string, and I'm gonna go back to the B minor, C sharp minor, D thing here in a second, but this is foundational. I wanna make sure we got this in our hands. Ring finger on the 14th fret of the D. I'm gonna have my middle finger on the 13th fret of the G, and then my pinky finger is gonna be on the 14th fret of the B. And I'm just gonna slide this whole, with E in the bass, by the way. That's an E6, and now I'm just gonna slide that whole thing back a whole step to this. And then this is that sort of, it's like an E9 with no third, because I've got my ring finger is gonna be on the 12th fret of the D. My middle finger is gonna be on the 11th fret of the G, and then my pinky is gonna be on the 12th fret of the B. Heard that before a million times, and as soon as I do that, you know the next thing that would be coming if we were playing a blues, especially once I go to the 4 chord, the A. Sort of, it's reminiscent, like you think about, like it's kind of like So What, Miles Davis, but that's a little bit, they're actually really voicing those almost as 2 minor chords, right? A little more modal. In this case, we're actually just doing chord qualities shifting over a tonal center. What do I mean by chord qualities? Well, you know, it's like a E6 going to this E7 kind of sound, right? So over the A chord, it's going to be, ring finger is going to be on the 7th fret of the D. You're going to have your middle finger on the 6th fret of the G, and your pinky is going to be on the 7th fret of the B. Now you don't have to use these fingers. I'm only using this because my tendency would be, if I was using this as a movable thing where I could do it in any key, I'd want to have that index finger free so I could play the bass note on the low E string, right? And so this is going to be on the 7th fret of the D, like I said, and then the G on the 6th fret, and then the pinky's going to be on the 7th fret of the B, and then slide it down a whole step to where you've got 5th, 4th, and 5th, ring, middle, and pinky, 5th, 4th, 5th, right? And then if you wanted to take it all the way back up here to that B, speaking of having the, your index finger free, go ahead and put your index finger on the 7th fret of the low E, boom. You're gonna have your ring finger is gonna be on the D string of the 9th fret. You're gonna have your middle finger on the 8th fret of the G, and then pinky is gonna be on the 9th fret of the B. And then I'm gonna, as I slide this down, I gotta do a little shifty McShifterton here, to where as this comes down here, my ring and my pinky, they're gonna stay on the 7th fret, ring on the 7th fret of the D, pinky on the 7th fret of the B. But then your middle finger, it feels pretty natural for me for middle finger to hit the 7th fret of the low E. And then your index finger go where the middle finger was on the 6th fret of the G. So, and you can do the same thing over A. Right? You've heard that before. That's familiar. Well, all that's happening is that you have 2 minor chords, 2 minor triads. In the case of E, you have a C sharp minor moving to a B minor. In the case of A, you have a F sharp minor moving to an E minor. And in the case of B, you have a G sharp minor moving down here to an F sharp minor. And those 2 minor chords, those 2 3-note triads, over those bass notes yield a sound that is Two different chord qualities changing. So this sixth to a dominant 7, it's really technically a 9 with no third, but in the summation of it, it has the function of a dominant 7. And in a blues song, in the blues genre, most of the time, your tonal center, your greatest point of resolution, is going to be some kind of dominant 7 chord. So there's just tension built in everything. But it's a palatable tension, and it's actually a tension that's even more inclusive to lots of different notes, right? So that's why this exercise is so critical and so important, because there's a lot of different music that is blues adjacent, from rock and roll to country to funk to jazz. And so without much further ado, let's see if we can expand on this thing here. So remember just a second ago when we started this whole shebang out here, I was showing you that we could actually use a B minor to a C sharp minor to a D. Let's get that in our hands real quick. So in this case, because I'm using what I'll call these little A minor shapes, let me pour a little bit more coffee in here. Jordan, you gonna want some of this coffee? I see you drinking a coffee back there. Yeah. All right. I put a little extra for Jordan. All right, so here we go. And these shapes here, instead of having my index finger free, I think I'm gonna go ahead and just use my index finger here on the main event. So I'm gonna have my index finger on the 3rd fret of the B string. I'm gonna have my ring finger on the 4th fret of the G, and I'm gonna have my middle finger on the 4th fret of the D. And so this is going to be this E9 with no third. Now I'm going to slide the whole thing up a whole step. And that's going to be index finger on the 5th fret of the B. And now I'm going to have my ring finger on the 6th fret of the G. And then middle finger 6th fret of the D. And then for this D over E is what I'm going to call it. We could call this an E11, but just somehow in the core of my being, I feel like that's complicating it, even though it's still true. D over E sounds better. Okay, so when we get to this is just going to be index finger on the 7th fret of the D, the G, and the B, holding it down. Now, even though you could argue the high E should be present in all these, I like to, if I'm teaching my hand how to make a chord and how to get around on the guitar neck with it, I want it to be as movable as possible to different keys. So I'm not going to mess with the high E, even though it could, okay? That already sounds like something, right? Now, if I wanted to take this to A, so now I'm just kind of thinking of this as E minor, F sharp minor, and then G. This is pretty easy. So you can have your index finger here on the 8th fret. It's nice because as you travel up the neck too, the frets get closer together, so it actually does get easier as far as holding the chords down. So index finger is going to be on the 8th fret of the B. I'm going to have my ring finger on the 9th fret of the G, and then my middle finger on the 9th fret of the D. And then slide that whole shebang up a whole step to where your index finger is on the 10th fret of the B. Ring fingers on the 11th fret of the G, and then middle fingers on the 11th fret of the D, and then C. You got a choice to make here. When I was playing the second go, felt kind of nice to engage the pinky on the 12th fret here of the the D, the G, and the B string on the 12th fret, but you could also use your index finger. You tell me. I don't know, when it's up there like that, I kind of like using my pinky. Feels easy, right? And then back to the F sharp shape. So, there's that. We should probably construct a little turnaround since we're kind of basically playing this kind of fancy blues. Right now, you might be saying, hey, Nate, this sounds kind of cool and I want to learn this, but if I'm playing with somebody else, what would they be playing? Well, God, I couldn't pour this any more awkward. This is on the internet forever. Cool. All right. So there you go. Pouring with a LP style shaped guitar, you know, kind of gets a little tiny like that. Anyway, dribbled all over the table, Chords and Coffee, masterpiece. But the coffee's good. Man, I use too much coffee when I make it. Some people complain, some people love me for it. That could honestly be said about a lot of things in my life. Okay, so moving on. So when we get to the turnaround chord, what if we did a little something like this? Kind of, you know, you got that It's a B7 with a sharp 9 in it. So what do we got here? Well, so what you're going to do is you're going to make a regular B7 chord. You're going to have the index finger on the 7th fret from the low E to the high E human capo. Then you're going to have your ring finger on the 9th fret of the A. Your middle finger is going to be on the 8th fret of the G. Now, you don't have to do it this way, but I feel like this is easy enough, and once you get this in your hands, it's kind of nice. So Pinky's going to lay across the 10th fret to catch that A and that D natural. The D natural, it's a flat third, or another way to look at it, it's a sharp 9. 1, 2. 2 is the same thing as 9, just an octave above. If I go up a half step, that would be the sharp 9 of the flat third. And then that little move there is just, and then I'm taking my pinky down to the 9th fret and then taking it off. Right? Just a good old-fashioned B7. And then here I might go, and if you remember that, if you haven't seen it yet, you should go check it out. We did a lesson on bluesy thirds, and this is directly extrapolated from that. Did I use that word in the right context? Extrapolated? Who knows? Anyway, Chords and Coffee. So you've got this. This is going to be middle finger on the 8th fret of the B. Ring finger is going to be on the 9th fret of the D. And then 7 and 7 with the index and your middle on the index on the D string. Middle is going to be on the B string. And then down to the 5th fret, D and B string. Very similar to the same idea that we're doing now, but we're doing this over an A. And if we were going to make it into full chord voicings, it would be like an E minor to a D to an A7. But we're not doing that because we're just doing this little stab here real quick. So we're going from that B minor to C sharp minor to D major, back to C sharp minor. And you might be saying to yourself right now, Nate, I don't know, that sounds a whole lot like Riders on the Storm, Riders on the Storm. It is very much similar. That's just in a minor thing. And if I remember, I'll come back to that. But before we go back, once we do that, a little B7 sharp 5, index finger on the 7th fret of the low E, skip the A, middle finger on the 7th fret of the D, ring finger on the 8th fret of the G, pinky on the 8th fret of the B. And if you want to emphasize it, then take your index finger and put it on the D string of the 7th fret, and then now your middle finger is going to be on the 7th fret of the high E. And get back into it. There she be. So we've got these triads that are moving up and down. This is still kind of a majory dominant 7 kind of sound. In other words, an E7. But as I sort of got on my own little tangent there with that Riders on the Storm thing, if I was going to do something like that, let's do it down here, and then we'll do it here. So, good old-fashioned E minor, you know it. Here it is again, just in case. Low E is open. Index finger is on the A string of the 2nd fret. Ring finger is on the 2nd fret of the D, and then everything else is open. And then F sharp minor. This is going to be index finger on the 2nd fret of the high E, the B, and the G. Make a little bar. And then you're going to be a ring finger on the 4th fret of the D. And then go up to this G shape. Now, this might be a little confusing because I'm going to say G over E. And even as I'm playing that, I probably wouldn't, if I was playing that in a band, I probably wouldn't play the D string at all. I might go... Right? But the whole point of this episode is I want to show you how these simple 3-note triads, major and minor, with different tonal centers, in other words, different bass note, start to create a whole other chord, right? A whole other sound. And in fact, what's really neat about this, let me give you this G really quick. I know I'm weaving here. This is conversational weaving. So I've got my index finger on the 3rd fret of the high E, the B, and then my middle finger is going to be on the 4th fret of the G, and my ring finger is going to be on the 5th fret of the D, with E in the bass. What's really cool about these is that the hope is that whenever you see, especially if it's in a blues and it just says E7, or in this case, E minor, you could actually play all of these chords in that same space, because functionally, it's just doing the same thing. You're just kind of elongating E minor in this case, right? Just like if we were to move it to A minor. What is that? Good old-fashioned A minor, open A string. You're going to have your middle finger on the 2nd fret of the D, 2nd fret of the G with the ring finger. Index finger is going to be on the 1st fret of the B. Slide the whole thing up a whole step. It's like a B minor over A. You're going to have your index finger on the 3rd fret of the B. You're going to have your ring finger on the 4th fret of the G, your middle finger on the 4th fret of the D, open A. And then slide this whole thing up here to a C on the 5th fret, D, G, and B, all held with one finger. Just like we did a second ago. Right? How cool is that? Taking these basic triads, major and minor, putting a different bass note underneath, and getting a completely different sound. Is this helpful to you? Do you like this sort of thing? If you do, comment below, and I would love to continue to pursue this. There's other ways to approach this, and there's other ways to look at this, and there's a lot of songs, and maybe it's helpful to actually, take something like Riders on the Storm, or Moon Dance, or gosh, there's so many different songs that have this kind of vibe to it. We do this kind of vibe every Saturday morning at 9 a.m. Central Time right here on YouTube. I'm so glad you guys are here. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for participating in the comments. If you like this and you want to see Chords and Coffee to continue to be brewed up every Saturday morning, well, you got to leave a comment or two, right? You got to share these videos, and you got to let everybody you know. If you don't subscribe, what are you doing with your life? We're living life the best we can with guitar in our hand. Thank you, friends. We'll see you next Saturday morning for another Chords and Coffee.